starting off the new year with the internet weather. This is the first one of the year. Surprisingly calm weather. Or when I say calm, I mean not much has changed from what we normally see. So I thought I'd take a look just for laughs at port 23 TCP Telnet in terms of the most probe ports being scanned in terms of sheer volume, how much scanning we're seeing on that port. So we'll look at a chart at that, but otherwise things are things we see all the time, or we've talked about ad nauseum on ThreatTraq over history. So you got Microsoft SQL Server, you've got your Microsoft SMB file sharing, you got this Ethereum wallet. There's a small number of actors. They're doing a lot of scanning for this still, but I don't know that they're being a whole lot successful. There's a vulnerability in the GETH wallet that I think most of them are targeting there. Port 80 could just be a lot of randomness. Remote desktop protocol through 389, we see that all the time as well, but not much change you can see in terms of their position. SSH 5555 TCP is associated with the Android debugger service, although we actually, when I look in the honeypot, I actually see a lot of like TR69 types of requests, so I think there are some other types of devices out there listening on this port for TR69. And they try to do inside the tags, you'll see they embed some shell script or something to try to take advantage of something. And then 8080 TCP, just an alternate web port that we see a lot of. So real quick, we'll just take a quick look at port 23 TCP Telnet. There's been a lot of scanning on this historically. I did actually a 5-year chart so we could kind of see the life cycle of this over time. And there's a big increase that occurred here back in the 2016 timeframe, where it went, from about, let's say a billion scan packets per hour, up to like 9 billion. So that's a pretty significant, and the number of scanned sources also trended with this too, although I'm not looking at that particular aspect here. But it's kind of been leveled out, I would say, for the past couple of years at kind of a baseline noise floor of scanning activity. And again, this is a lot of that IoT stuff that we see all the time, looking for IoT embedded devices that are listening on port 23 TCP. Mirai, I think I mentioned Mirai accounted for this really large uptick back in 2016. And there's been other families of malware like Satori and some of these other ones that are variants of Mirai. Based on the same code base that have come and go, and they're still around as well.
Well, and I feel like when I see stories about Telnet, it tends to sometimes is maybe a local ISP that deploys like the DSL modem.
Oh, right.
And it's like they leave
customer provided equipment.
So like is every single customer in because that was I saw an article, a few articles about different like just local. The boxes are left with Telnet open, and it's usually nobody knows. It's here's a box, put it in your house, and
right. Yeah, for sure. With like DSL modems or other types of equipment that's used to by ISPs to get their customers onto the network. Sometimes we see like big pockets of these in a certain internet service provider, like a consumer internet service provider that's providing internet access. A lot of times in other countries, I've seen, like you get like South America, you get a big pocket in Argentina for some reason, and then you realize, oh, there's a vulnerability on this one manufacturer's device, but that's what they deployed to all their customers. So yeah, you're right. That does tend to happen here and there as time goes by and people find things.
Because that's billions. Like it seems like that 9 billion makes the 1 billion look small, but that's not nothing.
No, it's not. It's a lot. Well, obviously that's why it was number one on the chart, and it's by number one by a large stretch. I'm not really showing the relative volume of traffic with respect to the other ports, but the 23 TCP scanning in general by sheer volume of scanned traffic. When you go here, so you can see it's probably like, I don't know, what is that, like 12%, something like that, of all scanning traffic. And this other includes everything else that we see scanning on. So this is a pretty large piece of the pie. The others, and then you see they get slivered down, but relatively wise, there's a ton of scanning on that port. So let's look at the most sources probing. I usually like to look at this because it tends to show you more activity that's related to botnet type stuff, where you've got a bunch of devices starting to do things, scanning on a particular port at the same time.
Right.
Large number of sources increasing, looking on that port. So again, not much change from what we've seen historically. The top 6 didn't even move from last week. Ports that we already discussed up here in the top ones. The only couple that we didn't, actually the one we didn't talk about from the previous chart is 8291 TCP. So we'll take a closer look at that one real quick. And then again, we mentioned 5555 TCP, but I don't have a chart on that. So I'm just going to show you that. And then I have maybe a slightly special surprise, although it's not really exciting. So don't get all excited about the surprise I have for you. So 8291 TCP, I actually took a closer look at this one. We've talked about it on the show before. This is a port that's associated with MikroTik routers. Mm-hmm. And there is a botnet that kind of sprung up probably in 2018 timeframe called Hajime that started to leverage a vulnerability on MikroTik routers on that port 8291. But it also, you'll notice that the scanning occurs in concert with scanning for port 8728. So just maybe in a slightly lower, it's probably number 11 on the top 10. Yeah. And we only showed the first top 10, but it was like 11 or 12. So you see that red is 8291, which is the one we're talking about that showed up on our chart. But the blue, which is just slightly less, is port 8728. And you can see that they pair together in terms of their scan patterns very tightly. When the 8291 diminishes, so does 8728, and they both went down here. So for some reason there was a...
What's the scale, 1,000?
This is thousands of scan SIPs. So with them combined, it's about 4,000, 5,000 scan SIPs here. This is the 5,000 mark here.
Got it.
But in reality, each one is probably like about 2,500 or so, or something like that, because I've got them stacked together here. Yeah. But you can see that there was a period of time here between like September to October of 2019, maybe middle of October, where it just shut down. I don't remember if there was a reason for that. I didn't go back and look, but it has since resumed and this scan is continuing. And like we said, there's a few thousand devices. That's decent enough for a botnet if you've got control of that botnet, and just something to be mindful of, especially if you use MikroTik routers. Again, just like we were talking about earlier, where some providers provide certain equipment to customers, MikroTik might be one of those types of routers or endpoint devices that ISP might provide to a customer. Right. I think in a lot of other countries, MikroTik is very popular. Okay. It's a little bit popular here in the United States as well, though. This is just a quick article kind of talking about, Radware actually put out a blog post about this vulnerability and MikroTik routers, and I think they mentioned Hajime somewhere in here. Oh yeah. It's believed as part of the Hajime botnet, which I agree with. I think it is. Although Hajime has since, over the past year and a half, 2 years, started to look and scoop up other types of devices as well, besides just MikroTik ones. Okay. But it's still scanning for MikroTiks. And then the last thing I thought, because the internet weather was a little kind of boring, there wasn't much in there. So I kind of went down below the top 10 just to see if there's anything else that kind of stuck out.
Is this a surprise?
This is our surprise, although don't get so excited. It's not that big of a surprise. But at least we could see that something's definitely up here with port 8081. I want to say this is probably somewhere in the top 20. I don't remember the exact number of where it was. But 8081 is used a lot by various products as an alternate HTTP, usually for administration or management of maybe some sort of middleware that you have, like Tomcat, although Tomcat's usually 8080, but you can see that there was kind of a quiet noise floor, less than 1,000 scan sources per hour on a regular basis. And this is a 6-month chart, but somewhere towards the middle of last month, middle of December 2019, there was a sharp uptick where it went up to about 10,000, 9,000 maybe, scan sources per hour. And this sawtooth waveform that I always talk about is very indicative of botnet related scanning, where a controller said, hey, everybody, start scanning on this port and tell me what you find. And then the fast ones finish earlier, the slow ones take longer, so you kind of get this little decay like that. I looked in our honeypot, and for the most part, I think this was most of what I saw from the port 8081 scanning is basically they're just doing a get, looking for, seeing if it's there, but they're also passing in basic authentication.
Got it.
And this basic authentication is, if you're familiar with like real basic web pages, you can enable basic authentication. It'll bring up a little dialog box that says enter your username and password. So like a real simple authentication, but a lot of middleware things still use that as an authentication. Yeah, it's real easy to use in terms of you don't have to have your own password database or user management database in your application. You can just drop a file, basically, an HTTP access file on the machine, and you're good to go. But the interesting thing to me, I guess, is that they were all trying this, which is a base 64 encoded username password combination, which you can just print this, and then pipe it to base 64, decode it, and you'll see that what's really being passed here is admin, username admin, password pass. So that's what they're trying to do.
They're not even trying for anything specific.
They're just trying to see if I get in. If I get like a response back that says authentication successful, I don't get like a 40, I forget which one it is. There's a 407 maybe or something where it's like authorization denied because I didn't give the right password. If they get something other than that, they probably log it, and then they go check to see, am I able to get into this, whatever this is that's sitting here at port 8081. So just an observation. If you have stuff listening on that, you might want to take a closer look. I didn't really go back and look at the internet to see if there's any well-known web-based applications using admin and pass as the password for on port 8081, but I'm assuming whoever this is probably knows something I don't know and is just looking for some small number of devices that might be exposed out there. That are vulnerable to that.
Recruiting another system.
Right. Yeah. Recruiting another web server into their botnet. So we're so used to looking at just what's in the top 10, and it's the same stuff we always know. But this is something that we don't always talk about, and we're able to see that there's definitely an increase in interest there, just not enough to get it into the top 10.
To see that the numbers don't come down, to me, signifies that somebody out there in the world is still putting out hardware that is still compromised, or that it still has this port open, because the criminals are going to continue looking for it if they keep finding it. So I would hope that 5 years later, the industry would have gotten to the point that they would have said, okay, no more Telnet open to the internet. I'm not sure if it'll get better. I hope it does. I'm hoping that if we see another chart in 5 years, it's not the same.